Hey everybody! Hey! How you feeling? Yeah, so I'm Brodie. Hello. I got involved with LARPing academically, specifically to use it as a therapeutic tool. I am in school at Goddard College. I am considering a master's program. If anyone has any other good ideas, let me know. So I have a ton of privilege, and when I go to fantasy LARPs or campaign games, I get to indulge that privilege pretty severely. Things are made a lot easier for me. Rather, the things that compose my identity typically don't create barriers for me to do the things that I want. That is true in LARP, and that is also true in therapy. So in building proper therapeutic practice, accessibility is as important to that as it is to LARP. There are a bunch of conditions that we have in games that reinforce certain ideas of what people can be, which is beautiful for when you're exploring identities, but not helpful when it's reinstating that certain conditions outside of the game that may create marginalized identities, or may create problematic marginalized identities, are present within that reality as well. So I did a survey to collect narratives of what marginalization in LARP communities is experienced as from that perspective. My privilege prohibits me from being able to experience that directly. So this is asking people what they are experiencing that keeps them from feeling fulfilled at games, or experiencing outward hostility at games. So let's see what's going on over here. So yeah, I ran this year, or last year, in 2015. Wait, no, that's wrong. I ran it this year. Okay. So it was a study of sociological and psychological marginalization that was picking up both on the personal experience of it and also how identities that people belong to or collectively experience marginalization. Marginalization we'll talk about as an identity that is not treated with priority given other dominant identities, which we'll get to in the next slide. This is based in ideas of brand narrative that, specifically with normativity, in that certain identities, when LARPs are constructed by dominant identities, even when you have these ideas of inclusion and acceptance, it's usually inclusive to the identity creating those conditions, hierarchically, because typically when games are written, it's from a composing body, then to an executive body, and then to an actual player base. So I did thematical analysis on this. I went through each person's narrative and then analyzed the thoughts and verbs that are being done within line by line with what they're saying about their experience. It was a pretty hefty survey. I used the motivation questions from the LARP census. Do you enjoy playing characters who like scheming? Do you like making costumes? It was administered through Facebook sites and through people who could get it out to, it was some snowball sampling, so give it to people to then give it to more people. It ran for a month, and it was predominantly American, and had about 200 responses that were suitable for study. Okay, let's see. So, these are what we have to take away from this. There are dominant identities. The people who don't have those identities are aware of their exclusion, and we don't really think that it's a problem, many of us who have that power to choose to think about it. So these are the dominant identities based upon my results and the LARP census. So primarily white, primarily men, primarily straight, primarily cisgendered, and of this age population. So you can see here that the census data also reinforces what has been released. So we can establish this as the dominant identity of players and writers in games. It was also asked within the survey if one is on staff. Also, this is inconsistent with other results, but predominantly this dominant identity also contributed to the staffing of games. So this is what people are experiencing, which may seem common sense to some of us, but that alibi is used to justify attitudes and justify exclusion. This is something that I'm sure we have all experienced, caught ourselves doing even, when you're like, wow, I'm treating that person differently because I don't like them out of game, or because I don't understand them, I don't know how to engage with them. Let's see. So social exclusion takes on different forms, but is perceived. It was actually the primary thing said by people of all identities, that experiencing social exclusion, a lack of access to an inner circle, was the thing that caused them the greatest amount of social discomfort at game. And also that those who belong to non-dominant identities, when that content was included in games, it was often to an alienating degree because it was constructed by people with identities that didn't align with the ones they were trying to portray. Let's see. So, why won't this change? So, these here are some of the terms associated with the research findings. These were things that came from people who belonged to that dominant profile primarily, or they had most, maybe failing one, had most identities that belonged to that dominant identity. And these were three that were used. Did not understand question. That was one where I asked, what types of social identities are not present in your game community? And people said, assassins. Some people do not believe in marginalization. Some people would get into rhetoric about how the act of inquiring about marginalized identities was in fact divisive, because they felt like their communities were already inclusive enough that everyone could come and play, and that the 3 people of color there were significant. And then that also goes into no room for improvement, that they, because they had taken measures to make their game an inclusive space, because they know that progressive inclusion is important, that there was nothing more that needed to be done that wouldn't sacrifice some of the natural flow of these spaces. Again, these are all from people who corresponded with dominant identities. And also, proportionally, this is something that I found in analyzing that it seemed like there was a small number of responses saying that change should happen. But people who were saying these things were people who corresponded with non-dominant identities, and the dominant identities we can see were in greater proportion than those with non-dominant identities. I think rather I should say people primarily fitting that dominant identity rubric. So the effect of it is that you have, let's say, half the people saying things need to change, and another half saying things don't need to change. And seemingly it looks like a binary, a split decision, Pepsi or Coke, when really it's a lack of comfort with change coming from a dominant perspective that is already creating content and creating social norms for these spaces. So let's see. This is a quote that I included. Because Larp content is generated and perpetuated by individuals who are not exposed to desires for change, which maintains a default perspective and it validates intersectional progress. This is a quote that I really like from Slavoj Žižek, where he says, "It is not only our reality that enslaves us. The tragedy of our predicament, when we are within ideology, is that when we think we escape it into our dreams, LARPing, that at that point we are within ideology." That is one of the difficult things about this, is that with the content creation within games, when we think we are in this world that is outside of our conventional world, the things that we don't pay attention to and that we are unaware of, when they make that jump with us, we then reinforce them as fundamental parts of reality. So, there are some limitations to the study. This was a small population. It was not out there for very long, and I'm still analyzing the results. I got as far as encoding and then still have to put that into proportion. To redo this with some awareness of the intent of the study and to access larger populations, in addition to analysis of location, regional specifics to large cultures and narratives, what I think give greater nuance. But what we can learn from this is that there are identities outside of the dominant, and these people who are predominantly creating LARP communities and LARP content, that aren't being accessed. And in a later presentation by Christopher Amherst, will discuss social capital, that we, as people of privilege and responsibility, those of us who have it, need to actively divest the social currency that we have, the social capital that we have been given due to our situation, in order to bring in people who have non-dominant identities so that everyone can play in the same way. Thank you.